All right. Great. Well, welcome everybody. I see a lot of familiar names joining us, so thanks for coming. I think I know most of you, if not all. Yep. Oh, you do have Paprika. Cool. Hope she's doing well. So Anne Marie asked me if I would be interested in doing kind of fairly regular, every other month or so, little webinars about training topics for our foster volunteers to try to cover some issues that are maybe common that you may be facing when you're fostering our dogs. And I love the idea, and I think it'll also help us build a nice library as well that we can keep for future fosters to watch or people who can't join us. So this was just a topic that I've had a lot of questions about recently. So that's why I thought this might be a good one to start with, but I'll also be interested in hearing at the end, maybe any suggestions you have for future topics of things you'd like to learn more about. But thanks everyone for joining us. Anne Marie, do you want to wave or say hi or say anything to anybody?
Hi, everyone. I'm Anne Marie. I know I've talked to a lot of people through email, but it's nice to see people's faces.
And feel free, like throughout this, to pop in and ask questions. Oh, goodness. I always like it if people interact. It's not a huge group, but it's not like so big that it'd be disruptive for you to be like turning your mics on or off. So feel free to turn a mic on and ask a question in the middle if you want. If you don't want to do it via mic, you can also type into the chat and I'll keep an eye on that as well. And feel free to ask questions throughout, and we'll pause and have some minutes for Q&A at the end as well. But I always do prefer it if it's not just me talking to my laptop, as you probably know. But for anyone who might not know me, I'm Angela. I'm the dog behavior specialist at HSHV. If you have kind of questions or concerns about fostering or something that you're experiencing with a foster dog, it is likely myself or Teresa who will be reaching out to you and helping you out and giving you information. And definitely always feel free to use us as a resource. I always worry that our fosters forget we're there, but we definitely want to be helpful to you in any way we can. And hopefully these educational programs will also give you tools that you need as well as you're continuing to foster for us. So, as I said, I had a lot of questions from fosters probably recently about separation training or crating, confinement, what to do when they have to leave their dogs unattended, especially with people maybe not working from home as exclusively as we have been. A lot of us have been for the last couple of years. So I thought it might be a good topic to start with. And I'm going to be talking about, why you might crate train, what some of the advantages are, talk about maybe some just training tips, ways to set yourself up for success when you're working on training your pup or your dog to accept a crate. Talk about things that you might use instead of an actual physical crate, but other ways of kind of containment or confinement. And we'll talk about some troubleshooting tips and when crating might not be the right option for a particular dog. So some reasons why we might crate train. One of the large ones is that, especially with puppies or maybe with a new dog that's not house trained, is it can often greatly assist in house training, because when we can't supervise the dog 100% of the time, if they're in a smaller containment area, they're less likely to eliminate. Doesn't mean that there aren't individuals who will soil their crates, but by and large, most dogs would prefer to not eliminate in their resting sleeping area. So by kind of keeping them in a smaller area, makes it more likely they will hold their bladder towels until they're taken to an appropriate place to go. So can definitely help in preventing accidents. Can also help with preventing problem behaviors when our backs are turned. So chewing, destructive behavior, things like that. Having a little place where you can put them where they can't get into too much trouble, so you can cook dinner or take a shower or something. can help manage a slow introduction to a household with other family members, kids, pets, other species. We always talk about not just coming in and letting your foster animal go and hope that everything goes well with all the other pets in the house. Sometimes they take a little bit of time to decompress, or you might have a pet at home that needs a slower introduction, or you're not sure how the dog's going to do with the family cat. So you want to take it easy. And crating can give you a way to have some options so that you can manage and kind of rotate those family members as necessary while you're introducing them. A lot of dogs like having a quiet place that's sort of theirs, where they can relax and where they feel safe. Some crate trained dogs will actually choose to sleep there and rest there with the doors open, even when they have the option for free range, because it's become kind of their own little spot. I also think that even if families don't intend to use crating in the home so much, maybe their dog is house trained, they don't have any problems that they're getting into with other family members or with chewing or anything. It's still not bad for a dog to be able to accept crating if necessary, though. It can help for things like future travel, boarding, if your pet has to be hospitalized at the vet, or even just boarded there for the day, if they're going in for a dental or something. There may be times in a dog's life that they're going to be confined in some way, and it would be good if in those events it's not a major stressor, it's something familiar that they've been prepared for. So whether or not it's going to be something you use or need to use anymore, still not bad for them to have that in their skill set. So anyone who's heard me talk before will has heard me talk about setting an animal up for success in training and how important that is. And we want to be proactive and really stack the deck in our favor that we're going to be successful and our dog's going to be successful. So before we even think about how we train a dog to go into a crate and be comfortable with the door shut and settle in there, we want to do a few things to maximize the likelihood that it's going to be an easier task. And the best piece of training advice in crate training that I've ever heard is, especially in the early stages when you're working on this, only crate a tired dog. If you want your dog to go learn that this is a place to go in, chill out, relax, take a nap, go to sleep, don't be trying to do that crate training at their peak activity time when they want to go for a walk and play ball, or they need to eliminate. Do all those things first. So when your dog is naturally feeling sleepy and ready to wind down and crash for a few hours, that's when you're introducing them to the crate as a nice place to relax. Thinking about location, so many times I'm in people's houses and the location of the crate is potentially causing some problems to the dog's willingness to go into it or relax in it. And this is just a great set of photos and such creative problem solving by one of our great fosters, Kim, who's I think with us this evening. But this is her current foster, Ren. And Kim was, sorry, I'm not somebody. Kim was working on crate training Ren, again, not necessarily because she needed to. He's been pretty well house trained. He's not been destructive, but she thought it would be a good skill that would make him, a more promising candidate to a future adopter. They like that, knowing their dog is crate trained, but was not having much success convincing Ren that the crate was something he wanted to go into and hang out in. Then she noted that Ren liked to sleep in the sunny spot by the door. So she very creatively took advantage of that and put that bed in his crate in his favorite spot. And you can see in the third picture, what ultimately happened was Ren happily went into the crate, laid down and rested because, you know, it was in the place that he was likely going to be anyway. So I thought that was just a great use of what we call antecedent arrangements. And thinking about that with the placement of our own dog's crate, foster dog's crate. And I think with any dog, it's going to vary what that means. I guess keep in mind that dogs are social animals. So sometimes it might be hard for them to be, especially at night, crated away from the family. If everyone's sleeping upstairs, some dogs might have a harder time, at least initially, being crated in an area well away from the family. In those cases, sometimes you could try crating up closer to, you know, in a bedroom or near the bedroom hallway or something. And even if the intent is to ultimately have the dog sleeping downstairs, you could do that over time, move the crate gradually further and further away from the sleeping areas. That's the way we troubleshoot a lot with families, even if they don't want the dog necessarily in the bedrooms long term. If it's possible, often that helps them settle down faster, sooner, especially with puppies. Likewise, you might not want the crate in the highest traffic area of the house during the day, especially in a busy household, because they're going to be continually stimulated by comings and goings, other family members, other pets, kids going in and out. So being right in the middle of all the traffic might not be the best location either. So kind of paying attention to where the dog most easily relaxes and try to take advantage of that to see if they would prefer a quiet area or being right with the family. Again, this is going to vary via dog, but find what's going to work best for that individual. There are a lot of different types of crates out there. The most popular being wire crates or the kind of very kennel airline crate, plastic crates. And I would say neither one of these is particularly better than the other. It really depends on the dog. Some dogs don't like that the metal ones rattle and make a little bit of noise. Some dogs don't like having a lot of visual stimuli when they're in the crate. Others don't like feeling as enclosed in. And so the plastic crate might be too confining or constraining. So that's always a factor to kind of think about with your dog. And maybe if possible to try both kinds and see if one works better than the other. A lot of my own dogs, I tend to pick breeds that are very easily stimulated by moving objects, my border collies and my terriers. And in general, for those guys, they seem to like plastic crates because it sort of turns everything down and lets it be quiet, and they aren't noticing as much going on, and they can rest easier. On the other hand, I've definitely worked with dogs that find that really claustrophobic and they want to be in an open wire crate. And I'd say the same thing with covered versus uncovered. Some dogs that are really sensitive to motion and visual stimuli might find it more relaxing and peaceful to have a sheet or a blanket draped over the crate. Others might find that claustrophobic, but that's one thing that you can experiment with and see if one works better than the other for that individual dog. One thing you might watch for, though, is don't cover it with anything terribly valuable. Some dogs might pull the cover in and start chewing it and use it as a chew toy. So you might want to watch what they're going to do with the cover, especially over a wire crate. And make sure that the crate is sized appropriately. I've solved many crate training problem for clients simply by saying, you know, well, show me the crate. And sometimes at first glance, it's clear that crate is way too small for the dog at their current size. Maybe they bought it when the dog was a puppy and they were to estimate how big the dog was going to grow, and maybe dog ended up being slightly larger than expected, and now the crate's kind of cramped, and the dog that was going in willingly no longer is. Sometimes it's a matter of just sizing up, and sometimes I've had that totally fix the problem. If the dog could stretch out, they were happy to go in it again. And I think I want to mention this too, because I do feel like the recommendations out there for sizing of crates actually are on the small side. I generally would prefer to err on the side of a little bit larger than what the box tells you for that weight or height of dog. I like this crate for this little Bichon guy. He can stand up, fully raise his head, lift his head, and he's well clear of the roof. He doesn't have to be stooped to stand. He could probably sit without stooping. He could probably lie down and stretch out on his side comfortably. Some dogs like to sleep curled into a little ball, but some like to stretch out. So I want them to be able to, extend their back and extend their legs. So really don't just go by the labels on the box. And obviously if you're working with our foster dogs, we can provide crates and we'll help select a size that should be appropriate for the dog you're taking home. One of the reasons I think they err on the side of being small or suggesting small is when you're house training, you might not want too big of a crate because if they have room to go eliminate away from their bedding, they might learn to be willing to eliminate. There are those nice life stages crates now for that reason. They have the movable panel, so when your puppy's small, you can close off some of the crate and you can just start to extend it over time as the puppy's growing. So that's a nice option as well. And another thing that I have seen happen that can be an easy fix when we detect it sometimes is, especially those wire crates can be really loud. That plastic pan can rattle on the metal as they step on it. The door kind of swings and clangs. If a metal crate is on a tile or linoleum floor, there can be a lot of rattling as the dog gets in it. So think about using some padding to minimize how much rattling is going on. Either putting the crate on a carpeted area or putting down a floor mat. I like to use those exercise tile squares that you can get at most kind of sporting goods stores for putting treadmills and exercise equipment on. My dog's crates are on top of those because they're kind of nice and cushiony and insulated and reduce that noise. But again, every now and then we've discovered, boy, we prevent that rattling, suddenly the crate training problem goes right away because it was more of a noise aversion problem. Pause for a second just to see if anyone has questions about sort of the environmental setup of crates. All right. So I want to talk about how to actually encourage the dog to go into the crate, sit in it, lay down, be comfortable with the door closed, hang out there for some duration of time. And, essentially we want to make that crate a place where good things happen and build a lot of value for it. So generally we'll talk about giving rewards, giving chew toys, giving Kongs, feeding, etc. in the crate. And there's two types of ways to use food in order to kind of promote good feelings about the crate. And I'm going to kind of talk about both. And really, it seems like a subtle difference, but it can have some big ramifications. So one way to potentially train a dog would be to use the treats to lure them in, meaning the treats are present and visible. They're being tossed into the crate to get the dog to orient towards the crate and go in and get in. Maybe we're giving a longer duration treat inside the crate. So we're using the food to build the attraction to the crate in the first place, and the food is present up front. And this can be a totally fine way, and it works well for lots and lots of dogs. There are some pros to it, is that it does often make the crate a desirable place. And it can be just a really easy, fast way to
when we have
get the dog to engage with the crate. a potential disadvantage is that if the dog is not feeling too inclined to go into the crate, it might not work. If they have to fully enter that crate to get to that treat, they just might not be willing to do it. It may only work until the treat is gone. So they might rush in, eat the treat, and want to rush out. They may chew their Kong and you shut the door and you walk away. But once the Kong is gone, they kind of freak out because they actually weren't really ready and comfortable to be left in the crate. So it might not create any lasting value for the crate. And sometimes it can make food look like a trap. One of the potential problems of luring is if we're using the food to bring the dog into a scary situation, like the crate, the bathtub, the car, if they don't like cars. Sometimes they will start to see food as a sign that they're going to be asked to do something scary, and we can get an aversion to food, and then food will stop working as a reward. And we don't want that to happen. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't use luring in some cases, or that it might for an individual dog be just a fast, easy way to do it. There are definitely times when I will use that, or at least as part of my training repertoire. But the other way we can use food is to make it truly a reinforcer, meaning it's a consequence that comes after the dog has interacted with the crate. So the dog needs to somehow make the choice to approach, get closer to, enter, put their body in, sit, lie down inside the crate. And as they do these things, they are followed with some kind of reward. Again, subtle difference. It's basically, what is the food present first, or is the food present after the action? In general, I almost always prefer this method because it is more likely to create a positive association with the crate. The crate is really what gets them to the thing they want, and interacting with the crate is the tool to have desirable things happen. You have to work at the dog's speed. Like I said, the dog who will maybe rush in to eat their peanut butter Kong, but actually then is going to freak out when they discover the food's gone. We might end up pushing that dog too far too fast. So if we're letting it kind of go at the dog's own pace of how much they want to interact with the crate, we aren't going to be as likely to flood them and overwhelm them. And it tends to be easier to fade the use of food because we can just start spacing out how often we're reinforcing, build longer and longer durations inside. It's not just I eat the treat and then I immediately want out. The disadvantages are it can take a little bit more patience, trainer skill, and work. But I'm going to talk about, we're going to look through at a bunch of videos now showing this process in action, because I do find, especially with a dog that is very resistant to crating, that this is more likely to work, frankly. So when we're using the reinforcement, we're talking about shaping, which means that we're going to be rewarding those baby steps that build up to dog hanging out in a crate with the door shut for some amount of time. There's a lot of steps before we get there that begin with just the dog turning towards the crate, looking at it, taking a few steps in its direction, standing in the doorway, putting their head in, putting one paw in, putting front paws in, getting all 4 feet in, standing there with an open door, etc. So along that path of all those little baby steps, we are going to be marking and rewarding when the dog proceeds kind of along that path. Markers are things like a clicker or the word yes, something that is associated with a treat following, that they will understand because of that association. When they hear that click or the yes word, it means something's going to happen. So we can kind of take a snapshot of that moment that they're doing the correct thing. So we'll mark that moment as the dog is doing the action, moving towards the crate, looking at it, stepping in it. And then we often talk about rewarding in position. So when I deliver the treat to the dog with crate training, I want to be delivering the treat in a position that is going to make it highly likely that the next thing the dog does is going to be engaged with the crate a little bit more. I might place the reward a little bit closer to the crate, or just in front of the dog's nose or in line with the door so that they eat the treat and they're looking up and they're still pointed at that crate, or they shift their weight forward, take one more step. I have something else I can mark. And I really want to be marking rewarding pretty frequently, just even baby steps, until they get into the crate, and then be rewarding a little bit for duration. But again, the food should only be present after the dog moves. And when I begin, I want to be in a low distraction area. And the first step I'll often do is simply getting them to target to the tray from a wire crate, or if I'm using an airline crate, I'll take the top off. So it's really more like going into a bed or a mat, more of a stationing behavior that doesn't have walls around it. And so I can first create a lot of value for targeting towards that surface. If I pull the crate pan out, I'm going to make sure again that it's on a soft surface, so carpeting or a mat, so that doesn't rattle. And I'll usually put some kind of towel or blanket on top as well, so that it's not making noise when their toenails hit that plastic. And then I'm going to get mark and reward for any motion towards sniffing it, stepping on it, standing on it, continuing to stay on it. Every now and then I'm going to toss what I call a reset cookie to get the dog to move off of the pan, and then resume the process. All the dog has become magnetized, and every time I reset them, the next thing they do is turn right around and head towards that pan again, to the point that I can barely get them to move off of it. So I'm going to show a recent video that we took of a very adorable little puppy. All right. So in this, this is the pan with the blanket on it that I want her to step and stand on. Every now and then I'll throw cookies off. And right now I'm letting her also, you'll see in all these videos, she has choice. There's not a whole lot else to do in this room. But if she wants to walk away, if she wants to go sniff and explore a little bit and then come back to the training, that's totally fine. There's no mischief for her to get into. There's nothing else really cool she's going to do. So I really want it to be her choice to interact with, in this case, the pan, and later on the crate. But as that's the thing that is reinforced, that's what she's going to want to spend more and more of her time doing. So here's the first video. Let me know if there's any problem with sound. Tried to tell me I needed to install something, but I was told on a previous call that the sound was fine. But type in the chat if there's no sound. And I'm going to be using a clicker as my reward marker in this. So the clicking sound you'll hear is just telling her she did the right thing, and then I deliver a treat. You could also use a word like yes. I'm resetting her. As long as she stands on it, I would continue to reward. She missed that reward and walked off, but that's fine. She'll find it later.
questions ready. Right.
All right. So she started out just kind of casually every now and then stepping on it, but even though she had freedom to do whatever she wanted in that room, she started to become magnetized and realized this was the place to be. When that's what I'm looking for, when it's hard to get her to get off the pan, basically. That's when I'm ready to proceed to the next step. I'm going to pause real quick to see if anyone has any questions about that stage.
Angela, I just have one question. How old should the dog be before you start crate training? Can you start with very young puppies or?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I would start certainly as soon as I bring my puppies home. I start. That was a 2 or 3 month old puppy that randomly got dropped off at the shelter. But yeah, I start as soon as I bring my pup home. And you know, sometimes responsible breeders or, you know, people who foster litters at some age will even start perhaps as they're being starting to be separated from mom and they're whelping them, maybe at night having the puppies sleep in a crate, or even having a setup as the puppies are getting more mobile of having a crate inside the exercise pen that the puppies are
Okay.
in. I know, you know, some of my puppies that I was able to see the whole litter, the person raising them had an exercise pen where they're all contained, and she would put crates in there. So that was just something that they ran into and they played in and they napped in, and the doors were open, but it became something very familiar and comfortable to them. So crate training those puppies was real easy because they had been started out. So it's something that even people raising young litters can do once they're old enough to move around and be separate from mom a bit.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So once my dog is targeting to that, either the bottom half of the plastic kennel or the tray of the wire crate, then I'm going to move that tray into the crate, or assemble the plastic kennel. At this stage, the door is going to be open through all steps. And I want to make sure that the door doesn't swing shut and scare the dog before we're ready to start adding that end of the door in. Because if the door swings and makes a noise or slams behind them on accident when they step in the first time, it could really set us back. So you could use a bungee cord and just secure it open. If it's a wire crate or, you know, an airline crate, you could probably just take the door right off temporarily. I'm going to place it on a on a soft surface and work in a low distraction area at first. All right. So this is a little bit of a longer video, and it's going to start out pretty boring. And there's going to be some downtime where I do let the puppy just walk away from the whole thing and explore and do her thing. But when she's ready and she wants to resume, she just walks over and we start clicking and treating again. A few things I will say about this setup is it's not ideal. Just didn't feel like tearing the room apart. And so I cheated a little bit, but ideally I would have had this crate on a blanket or a mat or a towel, not just that hard floor. I would have had that door secured so that there wasn't a chance it would swing shut. It was kind of a sticky door. It wasn't moving very readily. So I cheated a little bit. And I probably wouldn't have it up against a wall in this corner. I would usually start it within the center of the room so that it doesn't feel as confined and closed in, but that there's more space around. Especially if I find a dog is a little bit worried about that confinement. The other thing I could have done here that I often will do is when I'm working on this type of crate is this crate in particular has a door on the side as well. And some of the crates we lend out to our fosters will have a front door and a side door. And so you could at first open that side door as well to make it very wide open. And sometimes first thing I'll do is just be getting the dog to run in one door and go out the other one until they're just traveling back and forth through the open doors. And then I'd shut one and have them just go into the crate with one door open. So that's a nice way that you can sometimes, especially with a dog that's more resistant to it, make it a little easier. With this, I just have the one door open. And what I'm going to be doing here is clicking at first just for her sort of coming into this area in front of the door, for her turning her head towards the door, for her maybe shifting weight forward. I want to look for really micro movements, and sometimes it might even be hard to determine what exactly I was, clicking for. Likely it was something I was observing, a weight shift, or even just duration of continuing to stand in front of the crate, especially at the beginning when she's thinking about doing other things. And sometimes I probably have some accidental clicks or just I marked something random. We don't always have the most perfect training session. So I always like to give the caveat that there might be things where when I watch it, I'm like, I don't know what my decision there, but the nice thing is it doesn't screw anything up as long as most of the decisions were to reward were correct. And other things that I, in watching this, would say is I want to deliver the treat kind of in front of the dog, as I said, so that they're very likely to continue that process towards the crate. So kind of in line with that door, maybe just an inch in front of where they are already. I probably start to get a little, I might push it a little bit. I'm getting a little impatient and I probably veer towards luring. Sometimes as she's almost getting in the crate, I'm dropping that treat maybe a little further in than would have been ideal. Because sometimes she is stepping in just to go get that treat that I deliver. She's going in a little bit further to get the treat. And it works out fine, but in viewing it, I would say I could have rewarded a little bit closer to the dog's nose. And if I saw any resistance, I definitely would have made it much easier. All right. So she was on the other side of the room, but she turned towards me. So I clicked and dropped a treat closer to the crate. She found a freebie. I'm gonna wait for her to, there we go, turn away from me and towards the crate door. So I clicked as she turned her head, dropped a treat more in line with the door. And she's free to leave.
you doing?
She's not so sure about this. She was really stretching her little body as far as she could and keeping those rear feet outside. And then she needed to take a little break. And I think I also comment here that I started to notice the value of the reinforcers mattered. If I was feeding her pepperoni, she was pretty happy about it. If I switched to cheese, she was more likely to say, I'm gonna go do something else now. So work with whatever your dog tells you is most reinforcing to them. So I had clicked for her just turning her head towards the door. I did deposit the treat kind of far into the crate, and it was a little bit too far for comfort. So she opted out for a second. Water break. There we go. She voluntarily put her head in there.
Look at you.
So now I'm just going to continue to feed duration of choosing to stay in there. And you'll see she's returning faster and faster now.
Yeah, she likes pepperoni better than cheese. Nice with cheese. She's like, you can go out. Look at you, Smarty.
At this point, I don't have to reward every little step.
That was a good job.
And that one, she just came back and stepped right in. So I didn't have to keep doing every little head turn, 1 paw, 2 paws, 4 paws. I'll pause again. Any questions on that video? All right. So once the dog is charging pretty confidently into that crate, I often call these in and out games. So they're free to move out. Sometimes I might even toss a reset cookie to get them out, but I want to see that they're choosing to go right back in each time. Once they're charging back in pretty confidently and also willing to hang out in there with the door open, with me occasionally dropping some treats in, then I can start work on closing the door. Again, I'm going to build up to this in small steps. So I'm going to start to just move the door a little bit and mark and reward, close it partially, close it but not latch it, latch it, then open it immediately, and then build a little bit of duration for the time they're closed in the crate. So little Bean was getting pretty tired at this point, but I was able to do a couple reps of starting to add some door motion. I'm just swinging it, clicking and treating. That was a little bit much, so she was like, I want out. And you can really notice on this video how loud that door is.
She might be done. What are you thinking?
Good.
You don't love the door.
So that was gonna take a little bit of work. That wasn't bad, but you can see that if I had gone any faster than that, I could have set myself back in my progress of getting her attracted to the crate. So don't feel in a rush to get right to that point where you're shutting the door and latching it. Once you are able to get that door latched, then it's really about building the duration that they can hang out in there. So once again, I'd say some tips: practice at a time your dog would normally nap. At that stage, I might provide some kind of long duration treat in the crate, have a snuffle mat or a stuffed Kong or a little chew thing. And I might intermittently start dropping rewards in over time, trying to space those out longer and longer. I find nice ways to do this are to either have a seat next to the crate, pick up a book, have a little treat jar, and out of the corner of your eye be watching the dog, and every now and then just dropping a cookie through the bars while they hang out in there. Or to get up and move around and keep returning to the crate every now and then. So, you know, this is a good training to do while you're folding your laundry and putting it away. You can fold, walk to the closet, walk back, reward the dog, pick up the, you know, next pile of clothes, go put them in the dresser, walk back, reward. So you can incorporate your chores into these training sessions too. And aim to let the dog out before they start to cry or fuss. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second, but if you're not making progress, again, think about those training tips at the beginning. Experiment with different locations and setups and crate styles. Back up and go to an easier stage. So if Bean didn't start to get worried when I shut the door, then maybe I go back to leaving the door open or only shutting it, only swinging it an inch or two. The other thing is that you can try an alternate confinement strategy, which I'll talk about, or you also reach out to us at the behavior team to see if we can troubleshoot for you. as far as this, should we let them cry it out? Meaning if the dog starts crying when you shut the door, there's a school of thought and tips out there that you know, just let them cry and wait till they stop and don't open the door until they stop crying. It's not ideal because that's a really stressful experience to go through for everyone. It's kind of relying on extinction, meaning the animal just tries a behavior until it does not work or result in anything, and hopes that then eventually they'll realize that's not effective. But that might not work that way. It could just result in more persistent barking that is unlikely to extinguish. And I've heard of dogs willing to bark in their crates for hours and hours on end. And at some point, someone wants to get some sleep and they go and open the crate up, and it is true that reinforces the barking. And we certainly don't want to reinforce 4 hours of barking, because that makes a dog that's like, okay, I'm willing to bark for 4.5 hours now. It's also just completely unpleasant for the dog. The barking is probably being motivated by some stress of being in that crate. And it's awful to listen to and sit through if you're trying to sleep or relax at all. So try to let the dog out before crying starts. So the best time to release them is when they're out, you know, just barely waking up from the nap and they're totally relaxed. The second best time to do it is right when if you start to see them winding up. If they're starting to get restless, a little bit of a whine, it's better to open the crate up right away than let it go on and on and on before letting them out. Or wait for a little brief pause. And to some degree, this sort of depends to me on the nature of the vocalization. So if the dog is just a little bit fussy, grumbly, like, oh, well, this is a bummer, I'm not, you know, really wanting to be in the crate right now, but they're not really getting frantic and distressed and high-pitched screeching, pawing at the door, then I might let a little bit of grumbling, see if that extinguishes, if they're just waging a minor protest about being crated. But if they are really into barking, screaming, crying, pawing at the door, digging at the tray, they're probably really distressed, and letting that go through an extinction process is just not great. It feels pretty bad for everybody. And I wanted to reference this puppy sleeping method. If you're training, we talked about it's helpful to train puppies to sleep in a crate because it's helpful for house training and sleeping during the night without getting into trouble. That's a common time when puppies might cry, especially those first nights home when they're put into a crate by themselves. The method that I found, and I know has worked for many fosters, is the first night that puppy's going to sleep in the crate, my puppy's, that crate the first night is going in the bed right between our pillows, like literally on the bed with us. So they're in a crate, but they're still sleeping with us. And then over time, I can move that crate to an end table right next to the bed. And then I can move it to the floor next to the bed. And then I can move it to, you know, the other side of the room. And then I can move it wherever I want it long term. But I found that method is great for having no or almost no crying at night, because they do feel like you're right there with them. And they learn to settle in the crate faster. And since puppies are small, that often works. You can often it's often feasible to put the crate in the bed at first. I mentioned alternates to crating. If a dog is not liking the confinement of a crate, trying something that gives them a little more room to stretch and move out might be better. So something like this, it's an exercise pen. They come in different heights and sizes and kind of freestanding. You can get covers for them, but those are really nice options to confine a dog or have them kind of present with you, but contained, but still able to move around a bit. You could confine them to a particular dog-proof room. So putting a gate up over, you know, a mud room or in a bathroom, a laundry room, something where there's not a whole lot that they can get into. using a baby gate to enclose into an area, as I mentioned, or if the need is just to limit the dog from getting into too much mischief while you're home and present, but not able to focus all of your attention on the dog, then tethering can also be an option. Meaning just having a leash and harness on and tying it to something nearby. I wouldn't leave a tethered dog alone, but if you just need them to prevent them from running around the house and chewing stuff up while you're trying to get dinner on the table, having them tethered in a corner of the room where you can see them and they have something to chew on and occupy themselves could be an option too. So all this said, crating and confinement is not necessarily for all dogs. We used to kind of say that all dogs need to be crate trained. It's a nice to have. There's a lot of, as I said, benefits, but it's not the end of the world. And if the dog or owner are really averse to doing it, it's not something that you absolutely have to do. Certainly, if the dog is panicking in the crate and is at risk of hurting themselves in it, finding an alternate option is going to be better, if for no other reason than safety. I think it's important, even with a crate trained dog, to be careful not to overuse crating, making sure that they're getting breaks to eliminate and stretch, and that they've had appropriate exercise and they've had appropriate social interaction, and not spending the vast majority of a day in a crate. And with dogs with separation anxiety, crating is sometimes thrown about as the answer to separation anxiety, because if a dog, presumably if a dog's crated, they can't destroy your house and rip your doors down and break out the window, which is true, but they still might destroy the crate, break out of the crate, hurt themselves in the crate. And the problem is that most dogs that experience separation anxiety, for some reason, almost always become distressed by confinement. Most dogs with separation anxiety are not real happy to be put into a crate, for whatever reason. So if it's truly a separation anxiety and not a crate training issue, then definitely contact us, because we can talk to you about a desensitization plan to get them more comfortable being alone, since that's really the problem. It's not a crate training issue as much as a separation anxiety issue. All right. So we're about out of time, but I want to answer any questions. And also, as far as some good resources, Emily Larraham, her YouTube channel, Kiko Pup, which I've probably sent many of you to if you had questions about any particular little training topic. She has some nice videos on crate and confinement training and using those for getting them used to being alone. Again, not for a dog with severe separation anxiety, but for a new dog that you're getting acclimated to the home, or new foster. And of course, you can always reach out to me. You can find me at the shelter, pop me an email. And I also want to pause now, and if you want to turn mics on or type in the chat if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them now as well.
Angela, I have 2 quick questions for you.
Yeah.
So first of all, what do you do if your other dog starts liking the crate and occupying it? So I now have the problem where Arlo is napping in Bloom's crate and he seems to like it more than she does. I don't want to punish him and make it seem bad, but like, do I make it only hers? What do I do?
I think that sort of depends on the dogs. Certainly some dogs will resource guard their own crate in a multi-dog household, so that could be an issue if the dog recognizes their crate as their resting spot and the other family or foster dog goes wandering into it. That could sometimes become a thing that they might get into a disagreement about. So in that case, to prevent a problem, I would shut the door when the dogs aren't in it. If all the dogs are just loose in the house and I'm around, I'd shut the door so neither dog can actually get in. And so it doesn't become a conflict area. You could also, and I had a client that we talked about location, location, location. This was a very creative solution too. She had the adult dog had her crate in one room, and they were setting up the puppy's crate in a different area of the house. I don't remember what reason, and they were really, really struggling to make any progress. And then they noticed the puppy walking into the adult dog's crate at times of the day when they were all just out and about and going in and laying down and napping. So they were like, let's move the old dog's crate over, go get the puppy's crate and put it right there. And man, their crate training problem was just done like that. Whatever reason, the puppy wanted to be right there where the adult dog was. The adult dog wasn't, really concerned about if her crate was 2 feet over. And that just felt better for the puppy. So you could do something like that. Or honestly, you could decide if nobody seems particularly concerned about it, nobody's fighting over the space, nobody's getting possessive of it, it's not a problem. You could decide it's not an issue. Does that help?
Yes, it does. And then I just have one other question. So, I talked to you a little bit about how I am going back to work soon, one day a week, and what I can do with Bloom. And I was wondering, is it better for her to see my other dogs or no? So she generally seems to be less anxious when she can be near my dogs. But when she's in the crate or confined, is it more frustrating to see them out and about and her confined, or is it less stressful to her? I guess I don't know which way.
I think that's another, the famous trainer answer of it depends. And kind of with all those other factors I was saying at the beginning about location and type of crate and stuff, I think, and placement in relation to the rest of the family, I think that's a really great example of that might vary on the individual. A really social dog that relaxes more with other beings around, other animals, might like to be in the room where the other dogs are. But you're right, another dog might find that frustrating. So I know you were gonna play around with some scenarios and kind of watch on video, and I think that would be another variable to experiment with. I know she's because I'm not sure what it would be for Bloom. She really wants to be around other living creatures, but also I don't know if she would find that frustrating. So I think getting some video of very short duration and comparing would be helpful.
That's great. That's a great idea. Thank you. I'll try that.
Yeah, good question. Some more questions? I'm kind of looking at the chat as well. All right. What about, since I have folks here, as I mentioned, this is something that Anne Marie and I hope to do fairly regularly, maybe like an every other month basis. And I'm wondering what other topics people would like to hear about.
I guess I would like integration with your other dogs.
Oh,
I
yeah,
guess
okay.
I've sent you some questions about Bloom and Arlo, and sometimes I really cannot tell if they're playing or fighting. It makes me a little nervous because they get really loud, and so I feel like I could use some more. I've gotten past the basic; they can all be in the room together. But now what? How do I know when one is over threshold, or just a little more household integration?
Okay, and maybe along the same lines too, body language and play and dog interactions, kind of combining that. Would that be useful too?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I saw the video. I did get the video. I'll get back to you on it. I think it's okay. I don't think anyone's upset, but yeah, I'll give you more information.
Yeah, because I think in the beginning I thought they were fighting, and now that I've had them more, I think they were playing the whole time, and I didn't. It looked aggressive to me, and so I didn't know if anybody else was confused.
I think they are playing. I think it's okay. I think they are playing because Arlo never tries to get away and Bloom gives him break, and then he stays there and keeps playing. So I think he's all right.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Angela, I was thinking just the basic, like how to introduce your dog to a new dog,
Okay,
just the real basics of fostering dogs.
okay. Fostering dogs when you have other pets in the house, is that what you're saying, or?
Yes,
Okay. Good. Dogs and other species?
yes.
Okay.
I currently don't have a cat, but I want
Okay.
one.
Good. All right. Well, definitely think about it. And if something comes to mind, pop myself or Anne Marie a message and let us know. And I'll keep kind of a list of those things so that I can make sure that any future presentations are kind of directed towards your needs and your interests and what you want to learn more about. But I always enjoy doing these. Hope this was helpful. I guess if there's no other questions or comments, we'll let you all go enjoy your evening. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks for
Thank
fostering.
you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Angela.
Thanks.